Good evening all, and welcome back to our channel. Pennsylvania might be known for its quiet towns and rolling farmland, but the deeper you go into its forests and mountains, the stranger the stories become. There are places in the PA wilds where people vanish without leaving so much as a footprint, highways where lights appear in the treetops and follow travelers for miles, hunters whose tracks stop suddenly in the middle of untouched leaves, and shelters along the Appalachian Trail that still carry the memory of violence. Tonight, we're exploring 5 true and deeply disturbing wilderness horror stories from across Pennsylvania. These aren't ghost tales told around a campfire. These are real events, real disappearances, and real encounters from some of the most remote terrain in the state. Before we begin, make sure you hit subscribe, click the bell, and leave a like on this video. It helps the channel more than you think, and it tells me you want more real wilderness horror stories. Now, let's begin with one of the darkest crimes ever committed on the Appalachian Trail. Violence on the Appalachian Trail is rare, but when it happens, it shakes the hiking community to its core. The trail stretches for more than 2,000 miles, winding through mountains, forests, streams, and shelters where travelers rest their tired bodies at night. Most hikers trust the quiet rhythm of the woods. They trust the shelters, the paths, the other thru-hikers they meet along the way. And, for decades, Pennsylvania's section of the Appalachian Trail had been considered safe remote, but safe. Then, in 1990, something happened at the Thelma Marks shelter on Cove Mountain that shattered that sense of trust forever. It started as an ordinary trip. 2 young hikers, Jeffrey Hood and Molly LaRue, were making their way north along the Appalachian Trail. They were experienced hikers, devoted to adventure and deeply connected to the trail's culture of community and openness. They weren't reckless, they weren't naive, they understood the dangers of the wilderness, weather, terrain, wildlife. But human danger was the last thing on their minds. Jeff and Molly were known to be generous with other hikers. They shared food, shared conversation, and shared guidance with anyone who asked. On that September evening, they didn't know that one of the people they had recently crossed paths with was not a hiker at all, but a fugitive. A man named Paul David Cruz. A man drifting along the trail for reasons no one understood. A man looking for his next opportunity to inflict harm. Cruz was already running from one violent crime when he encountered the couple. And the Appalachian Trail gave him exactly what he wanted: distance from law enforcement, access to strangers who trusted too easily, and shelters far enough from help that screams could vanish into the trees without reaching another soul. On September 13, 1990, the Thelma Marks shelter became the site of one of the most brutal crimes in Appalachian Trail history. Hikers who came upon the shelter the next day found a nightmare. Jeff had been shot multiple times. Molly had been bound, assaulted, and stabbed repeatedly. The scene was chaotic but silent, the forest holding the stillness of early morning around a shelter where life had been violently extinguished. The brutality of the act did not match the quiet permanence of the surrounding trees, creating a chilling disconnect that survivors and investigators still remember. There is something uniquely horrifying about violence in the wilderness. In cities, brutality is awful but almost expected. In remote places defined by solitude and beauty, it feels like a violation of nature itself. Jeff and Molly weren't just victims. They were hikers, part of a community that believed in mutual trust, in looking out for one another, in the unwritten rule that those who seek the trail seek peace. The investigation moved fast, but not fast enough. Cruz was already deeper into the wilderness. For days, hikers were told to be cautious. Volunteers spread out searching for him. Fear spread across Pennsylvania's hiking networks. For the first time in years, shelters emptied. Thru-hikers skipped sections. People camped in groups. No one wanted to be alone. When Cruz was finally captured, he was still living on the trail, blending in among hikers who had no idea they had shared campfires and conversation with a killer. During the trial, the horror became clearer. Cruz had approached them under the guise of being a fellow hiker. That was all it took. One moment of trust. He overpowered Jeff first, then turned his attention to Molly. Her suffering was prolonged and merciless. The brutality inflicted on her was described in court documents but rarely spoken aloud by the people who handled the case. Some horrors resist words. What investigators pieced together was this: Cruz had no plan, no motive beyond violence. He had chosen them simply because they were there, isolated, exposed, trusting. The randomness of it terrified the hiking community even more than the brutality. You can avoid dangerous neighborhoods. You can avoid shady bars. You can avoid people with obvious ill intent. But you cannot identify a predator in hiking gear, carrying a backpack, moving with the same tired steps as everyone else. The murder of Jeff and Molly changed the Appalachian Trail permanently. Rangers increased patrols. Shelters were monitored more frequently. Hikers became more cautious about strangers, and the legacy of their deaths is still used as a cautionary tale in trail safety classes and guidebooks. Yet the most haunting part of this story is not the violence itself. It is the way the wilderness swallowed the sound. No one heard them. No one knew. The shelter sat quiet in the darkness while their lives were taken, and the trees stood silent as though indifferent. But the trail did not forget. Hikers who pass Thelma Mark's shelter often say, the place feels different, heavier, quieter. Some say they hesitate before stepping inside. Others say they feel compelled to leave an offering, a stone, a flower, something small to acknowledge the tragedy. People who knew Jeff and Molly still speak of them as bright, kind souls who believed in the good in others. In that sense, the trail remembers the people more than the crime. Over the years, the story has become a reminder of vulnerability, not to terrify hikers, but to make them mindful. The wilderness is peaceful, but peace is not the same as safety. The remoteness that draws people in is the same remoteness that gives danger room to breathe. Still, the Appalachian Trail is a place of healing for many. Even after what happened, thousands continue to hike past the shelter every year. Some stop and rest. Some walk by quickly. Some whisper a quiet message of remembrance. Everyone knows the story, or hears it eventually. And when they do, they understand the lesson woven into the trees. Trust is a gift. The wilderness is not a shield. And danger sometimes wears the same backpack as everyone else. But Jeff and Molly's story is not only a horror story, it is also a reminder of who they were, two people seeking beauty in the world, stolen by someone who carried none in himself. Their memory remains stronger than the violence that ended their lives, and the trail, long and winding, carries their names with every hiker who walks its miles and remembers. I've spent years researching disappearances, and no matter how many cases I study, Pine Creek Gorge always lingers in my mind. Something about the place burrows under the skin, its beauty, its silence, its sheer size. People call it the Grand Canyon of Pennsylvania, but that nickname has always felt wrong to me. The Arizona Canyon is too open, too exposed. Pine Creek Gorge is different. It swallows you, it encloses you. It makes you feel like you're walking into the lungs of the earth, breathing with something older than you can comprehend. And once you've been there long enough, you start to understand how someone could vanish inside it without leaving a trace. That's what happened to a man named Michael Malinowski in 1996. Some cases are complicated because of the evidence. His is complicated because of the lack of it. Every disappearance has its ghosts, but his feels like the forest itself took him. I didn't know Michael personally, but I've spoken with enough people who did to feel like he's no longer a stranger to me. He was the kind of man who lived for the outdoors, patient, careful, and deeply connected to nature. He carried a camera more often than he carried anything else. His photographs still circulate in small groups online, shared by those who remember him. Waterfalls swallowing sunlight, fog rolling off the gorge at dawn, the lonely curve of Pine Creek snaking through the wilderness. He wasn't reckless. That's the first thing every person emphasizes. Michael respected the places he explored. He didn't take unnecessary risks. didn't wander off trails without preparation, didn't behave like the caricature of an inexperienced hiker. That's what makes his disappearance so disturbing. Everyone agrees he wasn't the type to get lost. But on one late summer day in 1996, Michael drove into Tioga County, parked near one of the Gorge overlooks, and walked into the forest with his camera. And he never came out. No one knows exactly what time he started. The only timestamp is the day he left home and the knowledge that he intended to photograph the gorge's rim from a few new vantage points. That's all. No detailed itinerary, no hiking partner, no scheduled call to confirm he made it back. Just a man, a camera, and a forest with a reputation for silence. When he didn't return home, no one panicked immediately. He was known to take long outings, hours alone with the trees, chasing the shifting light. It wasn't unusual for him to lose track of time. His family assumed he'd return by nightfall, then by midnight, then by morning. But morning came, and Michael didn't. I visited the overlook where his car was found, not because I expected to uncover anything new, but because I needed to understand the terrain myself. It's a beautiful spot. You can see for miles, watching the world fall away into layered ridges. The trees shift color with the seasons like slow-moving flames. But if you turn around and face the forest, the beauty becomes something else entirely. The trails start clear and well-marked, but within minutes, they fracture into dozens of narrow paths formed by deer, hunters, and decades of hikers. It's easy to lose direction, and the deeper you go, the thicker the silence becomes. Search teams followed those trails for days. They brought dogs, volunteers, helicopters. They fanned out along the cliffs and down into the gorge. I've spoken with a few of the searchers. They all told me the same thing. The forest felt wrong during that search, as though it had swallowed every hint of Michael and refused to give anything back. One man told me he was certain they'd find at least a piece of clothing. A lens cap, a boot print, something. But there was nothing, not a broken branch, not a disturbed patch of ground, not a single clue indicating which direction Michael had gone. The dogs picked up a faint scent near the first mile of trail, then lost it as quickly as they found it. It vanished like smoke in the wind. In the wind! Whenever I think about that detail, I imagine Michael stopping to take a photograph, adjusting his camera, and walking a few steps off the main path to find the perfect angle. That small movement, stepping just out of view, could have been the moment everything changed. A slip on loose soil, a fall into a hollow disguised by leaves, a misstep near the edge of the cliff. But the searchers looked for falls. They searched the rock faces. They rappelled down into ravines. They probed hidden crevices. They looked everywhere someone could have fallen, and everywhere someone could have climbed. They found nothing. That's the part that refuses to make sense. People don't just disappear. Bodies don't melt into forests. Evidence doesn't evaporate. When someone goes missing in the wilderness, search teams usually find something. Pine Creek Gorge did not offer that courtesy. Some people believe Michael intentionally disappeared, but that theory collapses quickly. Nothing in his life hinted at a desire to run or hide. He wasn't in debt. He wasn't depressed. He wasn't engaged in anything suspicious. He was, by all accounts, planning future hikes and new photography projects. Others insist he was attacked by wildlife. But the predators in the region aren't known to eliminate every trace of a person. Bears don't bury evidence. Coyotes scatter remains. Even the largest animals leave clues. Michael left behind nothing. Then there are people who talk about the gorge taking him. They aren't being metaphorical. There's a quiet belief among some locals that Pine Creek Gorge has moments of strangeness, moments when the land feels alive in ways that aren't easy to describe. They talk about odd pockets of cold air that appear without explanation. Areas where sound carries strangely, places where the compass needle drifts lazily to the side, refusing to point north. I've stood in a few of those spots myself. I don't know what causes them. Maybe magnetite deposits. Maybe airflow through caves beneath the surface. But when the wind dies and the forest stands perfectly still, the silence becomes heavy. Too heavy. like the world is holding its breath. It was in one of those pockets where a later hiker claimed he heard something that unnerved him. He said he was walking alone near dusk when he heard a faint clicking sound, like a camera shutter. He called out, half-jokingly, asking if someone was photographing wildlife. No one answered. When he hiked back to the overlooked parking lot, he found a flyer about Michael's disappearance pinned to the bulletin board. He leapt, shaken. I include stories like that not as evidence, but as part of the atmosphere that surrounds disappearances in places like this. When a man vanishes without explanation, people start filling in the blanks with whatever fragments of experience they have. Strange noises, odd feelings, the forest shifting at night. None of it solves the mystery, but it becomes part of the story. In the case of Michael Malinowski, the story is built more from what is absent than what exists. Theories grew over time, each one weaker than the last. Some said he slipped into Pine Creek and was pulled downstream, but search teams canvassed the banks for miles. Some said he got lost, wandered deep into the gorge, and succumbed to the elements. But even then, remains should have surfaced eventually. But they didn't. And after weeks of searching, the official efforts were called off. Volunteers kept looking. Family members kept returning. Friends retraced his favorite spots. I've seen the places he photographed. Some are difficult to reach, but not impossible. None of them felt like death traps. His camera bag was never found. His body was never found. His clothing was never found. No hunter stumbled across bones in the years that followed. No storms exposed hidden debris. No new trails revealed lost evidence. Complete absence is more terrifying than any physical threat. I remember speaking to a retired ranger who had been part of the search. He told me the forest never felt threatening during the search, just indifferent, huge, silent. It was like looking for a missing grain of sand in the desert, he said. A human body isn't that small, but in those woods, it might as well be. To this day, Michael's disappearance remains one of the most unsettling mysteries in Pennsylvania's wilderness. The official record lists him as missing, unresolved, open. But anyone who has spent time in Pine Creek Gorge knows how deeply the case lingers. I often wonder about the last photograph he took. Did he frame the gorge in its evening light? Did he capture the fog drifting upward from the valley floor? Did he aim his lens at the cliffs glowing gold under the setting sun? Or did he never get the chance to lift the camera at all? Whatever happened, it happened fast enough that he couldn't call for help, and quietly enough that no one heard him. When I walk the trails, I think about the way the forest changes with every step. One moment you're on solid ground, the next you're standing on a layer of leaves hiding a sinkhole or a drop-off. Nature doesn't warn you. Nature doesn't negotiate. It simply shifts its weight. And sometimes, if you're unlucky enough to stand on the wrong patch of earth, you shift with it. But that explanation feels too simple, too convenient. People fall in forests all the time. People slip, people misjudge distances, people take bad steps. Those accidents leave trails, evidence, signs of struggle. Michael left nothing. I don't believe he walked away. I don't believe he staged anything. I don't believe he was attacked by animals or people. I believe he walked into the forest and crossed some invisible threshold into a piece of land that has swallowed more than a few people over the years. Pine Creek Gorge has always held a quiet darkness to it. Not a supernatural darkness, but the kind that comes from deep time. Ancient stone, hidden ravines, sinkholes, fissures, narrow gaps covered by foliage, places where a human being can vanish so completely that not even decades of storms can reveal what's beneath. Sometimes the earth keeps its secrets. I leave the gorge each time with the same feeling, that the forest knows exactly what happened and that it will never tell. And in the end, that is the horror of Michael Malinowski's disappearance. It isn't violence, it isn't bloodshed, it's silence. Pure, absolute, unbroken silence. A man walked into a forest with a camera, and the forest closed its mouth around him. Oh! The Allegheny National Forest stretches across hundreds of thousands of acres in northwestern Pennsylvania, a vast quilt of hardwood ridges, deep ravines, and remote hollows stitched together by rivers and old logging roads. It is a place built for solitude, quiet, heavy solitude, where you can walk for hours without hearing another human voice. For hunters, it is paradise. For hikers, an escape. For those who love the wilderness, it is one of Pennsylvania's greatest treasures. But for decades, the forest has carried a different reputation beneath the surface. A darker one. There is a long-running cluster of disappearances and strange cases there. Mostly hunters, mostly men familiar with the land, men who knew how to survive in the wild yet vanished without leaving the kinds of traces search teams expect to find. And when disappearances happen repeatedly in the same region, separated by years but linked by eerily similar patterns, the stories begin to merge into something larger than individual tragedies. They become a mystery that feels like the land itself is swallowing people. The Allegheny National Forest was established in 1923, long before the region became heavily trafficked by recreational visitors. Even then, locals whispered about hunters who walked into the forest and didn't come back. Some were found days later, wandering and disoriented. Others were never found. And even now, law enforcement and search and rescue teams speak quietly about the forest's cold pockets, places where people seem to vanish with unnerving frequency. The first case that stands out in the modern era happened in the 1970s. The exact year varies depending on who tells it, because some of the details come from families and local officers who were never comfortable discussing it publicly. But the outline of the story remains consistent. A man in his 40s, an experienced hunter who had been hunting the same plot of land with his family for years, separated from his small group during a morning drive. They weren't concerned at first, splitting up was common. But when he didn't return after several hours, they began searching. His tracks were clear for a short distance, then simply stopped. No signs of a struggle, no signs of injury, no drag marks, no broken branches, just an abrupt end. The men who searched for him later said it felt as though he had simply walked out of existence. Search teams arrived quickly. Dogs traced the tracks to the same point and then became confused, circling, whining, losing the scent. Helicopters scanned the area. Volunteers grid searched for days. Nothing. The second case came in the 1980s. This time it was a younger man in his early 30s who went missing during archery season. He had been hunting with a friend. They split up to still hunt along parallel ridges. The friend reported hearing a single sharp sound, maybe a shout, maybe something else, but he couldn't place it. When he reached the meeting point they'd agreed on, the younger man wasn't there. The friend searched the immediate area, calling out until his voice echoed uselessly off the trees. By dusk, a full search was underway. They found a few footprints, then lost them on a slope covered in leaves. At the bottom of that slope was a stream. The immediate assumption was that he might have slipped, been injured, or followed the stream downhill. But searchers combed that waterway for miles. They found no blood, no clothing, no gear, no bow, no arrows, nothing. His disappearance left behind no more evidence than the one before it. By the time the 1990s arrived, people in the Allegheny region had begun comparing the cases. Up until then, each disappearance had been treated as an isolated tragedy, but patterns were emerging. The men who vanished were experienced outdoorsmen. They disappeared during daylight. They left minimal or no evidence. And the locations, while spread across the forest, formed a loose cluster in some of the region's most remote terrain. Then came the early 2000s, when a third case added a new layer of mystery. This time, the missing man was older, in his 60s, but still physically capable. He'd hunted the Allegheny for over 40 years. He knew the ridges so well he could navigate them blindfolded. Friends described him as cautious, methodical, and not prone to panic. He set out one morning from the same spot he had used for decades. When he failed to return by afternoon, his hunting partners became concerned but not alarmed. They fired signal shots. No response. They hiked toward his usual spots. He wasn't there. The next day, search teams found his hunting stand, but no sign he had ever reached it. They found boot prints heading in that direction, then veering slightly, then stopping abruptly in an area of thick leaves. Once again, the tracks simply ended, as though he had stepped onto the air itself. A few yards away, a patch of brush was bent outward, but in a direction opposite from what one would expect if someone fell or was dragged. Searchers noticed something else. No animal sign, no bear tracks, no coyote spoor, no signs of scavenging. Though days passed and weather shifted, no remains surfaced. People began to talk about disappearances more openly after that. Some believed there was a serial predator, human or animal, lurking in the woods. But predators don't erase footprints. They don't remove gear. They don't hide bodies so completely that decades pass without any sign. Others began whispering about sinkholes, hidden gaps in the forest floor where someone could fall through without warning. The region has pockets of karst geology, caverns, underground channels, collapsed mine shafts from logging and oil history. But extensive searching never identified any such feature near the disappearance sites. And in each case, the missing men were only yards from solid trail routes or known landmarks. In the late 2000s, another case shook the region. A man and his teenage son were hunting separately but within shouting distance. Around midday, the son heard his father whistle, a signal they used to check in. When he whistled back, no response came. He walked toward the last place he'd heard the sound. His father wasn't there. At first, he thought it was a prank. His father was playful. He liked teasing, but minutes became hours. When the boy returned to camp, expecting to find him there, the campsite was empty. Authorities were notified. This search was particularly intense because the boy was frantic and search conditions were ideal. Good weather, dry ground, moderate temperature. Dozens of people combed the area within hours. Dogs tracked the father's scent for nearly half a mile, then hit the same wall the earlier cases had, a total absence. His gun was never found. His clothing was never found. His remains were never found. By now, residents of Warren, McKean, Forest, and Elk counties were uneasy. Some were afraid to admit it publicly, fearing ridicule, but among hunters, rumors spread quickly. Some said they'd heard strange noises deep in the hollows, short, clipped sounds, not animal, not mechanical, something else. Others claimed to have seen odd lights at night, glowing softly through the trees, drifting in ways that didn't match headlights or lanterns. Most dismissed the stories. But everyone agreed on one thing: the disappearances didn't make sense. Then came the account from the early 2010s, one that never made major news but circulated among local search and rescue volunteers. A man hunting alone vanished near a remote logging road. His truck was found parked neatly, keys inside, nothing out of place. It looked like he had stepped out for a moment. Tracks showed he'd walked about 300 yards into the woods. Then they stopped. Not because the ground changed, not because a storm erased them, because the prints ended in the middle of an unbroken patch of forest floor. Searchers described a feeling of unease in that area. Radios cut out unexpectedly. Dogs refused to go further. One handler said his dog whimpered and pulled backward, tail tucked, refusing to advance. The team leader marked the location on a map, noting that 2 older cases had occurred within a 2-mile radius. There was no body, there were no clues, just another absence. Over the years, people have tried to explain the Allegheny cluster logically. The forest is enormous. It's easy to get lost. People fall, get injured, succumb to the elements. Animals scatter remains. Weather erases signs. But those explanations crumble under scrutiny. Experienced hunters don't wander in circles for no reason. They don't strip off clothing. They don't leave behind loaded rifles. They don't vanish mid-trail as if lifted upward. And if they die of exposure, their remains are found eventually. Yet remains were not found. Not in one case. Not in 2. Not in 3. Not in any of them. As the years passed, the cluster became a quiet part of Allegheny folklore. Veterans of the forest share advice whispered half in seriousness, half in superstition. Don't hunt alone near certain ridges. Avoid the deep hollows at dusk. If the woods go silent, leave immediately. Don't ignore your instinct if it tells you something is off. When I interviewed a retired ranger, he hesitated for a long moment before speaking. He told me that in all his decades on the job, he believed most disappearances came down to simple tragedy falls, medical events, disorientation. But Allegheny, he said, was different. Something about those cases bothered him, something about the patterns, something about the way the earth seemed to swallow men whole. He didn't claim anything supernatural. He wasn't that type, but he did say this: Allegheny feels old, older than people, older than maps, older than the idea that humans are meant to understand everything. Some places just don't want to give up their dead. That sentence has stayed with me, because in the end, the mystery of Allegheny isn't about monsters or creatures or hidden killers. I've driven a lot of roads in Pennsylvania, but none of them feel the way Route 44 does at night. There's something about that stretch between Cootersport and Cherry Springs, something in the trees, something in the darkness, something in the silence that gets under your skin. People call it the haunted highway. Some mean it jokingly, others don't. And if you spend enough time out there, especially alone, you start to understand why. For years, I thought the stories were exaggerations. Lights in the woods, phantom vehicles, disappearing figures, lost time experiences. Every rural area has legends like that. But Route 44's legends aren't like the ones in other towns. They're older, stranger, more consistent. People who don't know each other tell the same stories separated by decades. Hunters, astronomers, truckers, locals, travelers. They all describe the same strange, quiet dread that settles on that road after sunset. The first time I drove it alone, I wasn't expecting anything unusual. I had been photographing the night sky at Cherry Springs State Park, the darkest place in Pennsylvania, and was heading back toward Cootersport around 2 in the morning. The park had been full of stargazers earlier, but by 1030, most had drifted away, leaving the lot almost empty. The sky was still brilliant overhead, stars so bright they felt like frost on glass. I packed my gear, got into my car, and pulled onto Route 44. 5 minutes later, I felt it. That shift in atmosphere. It wasn't fear. It wasn't even discomfort at first. It was more like pressure, the sensation of someone sitting in the back seat, breathing quietly, waiting. I checked the mirror, saw nothing, and kept driving. Most of Route 44 is forest on both sides, deep, dense forest. Under daylight, it's beautiful. At night, it becomes a wall black, absolute, impenetrable. My headlights seemed too small. The road seemed too narrow. The trees seemed too close. That's when I noticed the first light. It wasn't a vehicle. It wasn't a reflection. It was a soft, pale glow drifting through the trees on the right side of the road. Round, smooth, maybe 15 feet off the ground. It moved slowly, deliberately, weaving between branches like it wasn't bound by the laws of the forest. For a few seconds, I convinced myself it must have been another car on a parallel road, even though no such road exists there. But then the glow dipped lower, floated behind a thick stand of pines, and vanished. I slowed down, pulled to the shoulder, and listened. Nothing, no engine, no footsteps, no wind, just silence. Deep, unnatural silence. Even crickets seemed to hold their breath. It wasn't the first time someone had seen lights in that stretch of woods. People had been reporting them since long before Cherry Springs became famous for astronomy. Old stories describe lantern lights drifting through the treetops. Some say they're ghost lights from long-dead loggers. Others say they're reflections from something in the atmosphere, though no one has ever produced a scientific explanation that fits. I sat there, engine idling, debating whether to turn around or keep going. Eventually, I drove on. That was mistake number 1. 2 miles later, I saw the second phenomenon. A figure stepped onto the road, not rushing, not stumbling, just stepping, like someone crossing the street in a quiet neighborhood. Tall, thin, human-shaped. My headlights caught the silhouette, but not the details. I slowed down, heart pounding, afraid I was about to hit someone. But as my car drew closer, the figure turned its head toward me and disappeared. Not faded, not ducked into the woods, not blocked by the trees, just gone. My car rolled past the spot where it had been standing. The road was empty. The shoulders were empty. The forest was a wall of black. I pulled over again, half expecting to see someone step out and wave sheepishly, apologizing for startling me. No one did. Later, when I spoke with locals in Cootersport, they told me seeing a figure on Route 44 isn't uncommon. Some say they're spirits of travelers who died there long ago. Others say they're shadows echoes of hikers who vanished in the surrounding woods. One man, an elderly resident whose family had lived there for generations, told me he believed the figures weren't ghosts at all. He believed they were something older than the road, older than Cherry Springs, older than the forest. Don't stop for them, he told me. They're not people. They only look like people until you get too close. His warning stayed with me, but my story doesn't end there. The strangest part happened later that same night. I had been driving another 15 minutes or so, trying to get off the mountain as quickly as possible. The road curved, dipped, then climbed again. It was one of those stretches where you feel completely alone in the world. No houses, no pull-offs, no cell reception, just miles and miles of dark forest. As I rounded a bend, I saw headlights in my rearview mirror far behind me, but gaining fast. Relief washed over me. Another car meant normalcy, another human presence. I kept driving and watched the lights get closer. Within seconds, they were right behind me, too close, blindingly bright, high beams cutting through my rear window. I tapped my brakes lightly, signaling them to back off. They didn't. They stayed glued to me, inches from my bumper. I accelerated. They accelerated. I slowed. They slowed. There was no turnoff for miles. I began sweating, gripping the wheel, heart hammering. The headlights were so bright I couldn't see the car behind them. Finally, I found a small pull-off, more a patch of flattened dirt than a proper turnout, and turned into it abruptly. The other vehicle swerved to avoid hitting me, shot past, and there was no car, no taillights, no sound, nothing. My headlights illuminated the road ahead. Empty, clear, silent. The forest swallowed everything. I didn't move for several minutes. My brain tried to convince me I had misinterpreted something, that the car had turned down a hidden gravel road or accelerated out of sight or something, anything logical. But there was no road, no intersection, no place for it to go, and the headlights had been inches behind me. When I finally made it back to town, I asked a few people if they'd ever had a similar experience. One man nodded slowly, saying, "You saw the ghost car." Another added, "That stretch of 44 plays tricks on you. Don't drive it alone at night if you can help it." Over the next few weeks, I dug deeper into Route 44's history and Cherry Springs' folklore. It didn't take long to realize how many people had seen what I saw. Dozens of reports of phantom lights drifting through the woods. Multiple sightings of figures stepping onto the road and vanishing. Accounts of shadow shapes standing just beyond the tree line. Stories of glowing orbs weaving between branches. Encounters with vehicles that tailgate aggressively before disappearing. And perhaps most disturbingly, disorientation and missing time. One woman described driving the road late at night, only to find that her 30-minute trip had somehow taken nearly 2 hours. Another man said he remembered passing a specific landmark twice, even though he never turned around. Some claim the road bends in ways that don't appear on maps. Those claims are harder to substantiate, but the consistency of the stories is unsettling. Then there's the oldest legend, the Watcher of Cherry Springs. The story describes a tall, silent figure that appears near the roadside or in the woods, usually seen from the corner of the eye. If you look directly at it, it seems to retreat. If you blink, it disappears completely. Some say it's a guardian, others say it's a warning. A few believe it's the forest itself manifesting in a shape humans can understand, When you listen to enough of these accounts, one detail repeats. No one ever hears footsteps. The figures make no sound. The ghost car makes no sound when it vanishes. The orbs drift in absolute silence. Even the forest animals seem to stop moving when something strange is near. Silence is the signature of Route 44. But it's not an empty silence. It's a listening silence, a waiting silence. Every time I return to Cherry Springs for photography, I prepare myself for that drive back down the mountain. I've never seen the same thing twice, but I've felt the same pressure, the same sensation that something walks the woods beside the road, keeping pace, watching. Some nights, it's nothing more than an oppressive atmosphere. Other nights, I've seen flickers of light between trees or glimpsed a shape that shouldn't have been standing where it was. Locals live with it. They shrug it off the way people in other states shrug off storms or wildlife. But when they warn travelers not to linger on Route 44 after dark, they mean it. They won't admit exactly what they believe is out there, but their tone says enough. There are places where the world feels thin, where the veil between the seen and unseen stretches tight, where the land holds memories that don't fade with time. Route 44 is one of those places. Cherry Springs is one of those places. And if you ever find yourself driving that road alone, deep in the night, with only your headlights to keep the darkness at bay, remember this. If you see a figure in the road, don't stop. If you see lights in the trees, don't follow them. And if you feel a car behind you that vanishes without a trace, keep driving. Whatever walks that road, walks it for reasons no one has ever understood. I've spent most of my life trying not to talk about what happened in the Tuscarora State Forest. I've tried to bury it, forget it, rationalize it, reshape it into something less frightening. But memories don't stay buried, not the kind that sink their claws into you. And even now, after all these years, I still wake up in the middle of the night with the same image burned into my mind, a pale, thin arm curling around a tree trunk, too high off the ground to belong to any human being. People always want to know the same things. Were you tired? Were you drinking? Were you hallucinating? But I wasn't any of those things. I was 19, healthy, sober, and hiking with 4 friends through a forest we thought we understood. Tuscarora State Forest was supposed to be safe. Remote, sure, but safe. People camp there all the time. People hike there every day. But not everyone sees what we saw. The first part of the trip was normal. We started early, laughing, teasing each other about who packed too much gear. The trail was quiet. The air smelled of pine and soil. The sun filtered through the trees in long gold slants. Everything felt normal, peaceful, predictable. Looking back, I can see the moment things shifted, though I didn't recognize it at the time. It happened when the forest went silent, not gradually, but all at once. 1 second, we heard birds, insects, branches clicking in the wind. The next second, nothing. It was like someone had shut off the soundtrack of the woods. Even the wind seemed to stop. We all felt it, the sudden stillness, the sudden pressure, the way the air seemed to thicken. My friend Mark called out, "Anyone else feel that?" We all did. None of us said it out loud. A minute later, we found the first tree. It wasn't unusual for fallen trees to block a trail, but this one hadn't fallen. It had been peeled, stripped, its bark removed in long, clean ribbons, all piled neatly at its base. No claw marks, no chewing, no sawdust. It looked like someone had peeled it the way you peel an apple. Porcupines? Someone suggested. But porcupines don't peel trees that high, and they don't stack the bark in neat spirals. We stepped around it and kept walking. No one talked anymore. That afternoon, we made camp in a clearing that looked like any other we'd passed. We set up our tents, ate dinner, tried to pretend everything was normal, but the forest still hadn't regained its sound. No cicadas, no birds, no rustling, nothing. When the sun went down, the quiet deepened. Around midnight, I woke up to the sound of footsteps outside my tent. Slow, dragging footsteps. Not boots, not paws. Something softer, like skin on soil. I froze. The footsteps circled the tent once, very slowly, as though whoever or whatever it was listening for movement. I tried not to breathe. I heard my friends shifting in their tents too. They heard it as well. We were all awake. All listening. The footsteps stopped just behind my head. For several seconds there was nothing. No breathing. No movement. Just the awareness of something standing inches away from me. Then I heard it. A faint tapping on the tent roof. Not scratching. Tapping. Deliberate. 1, 2, 3. I thought I was going to vomit. Eventually, the steps drifted away. None of us slept the rest of the night. The next morning, we packed up immediately. No breakfast. No conversation. Nobody wanted to admit what we'd heard. We just wanted to get out of the forest. But the forest didn't want to let us go. 2 hours into the hike, we noticed shapes between the trees. At first, they looked like shadows. Then they moved. Tall figures. Thin, too thin standing behind trunks, peeking out just enough for us to catch glimpses before they vanished again. Every time we looked directly at them, they withdrew. But when we walked, they kept pace with us, staying just out of sight. It wasn't one figure, it was several. A dozen, maybe more, moving silently through the forest parallel to us. At one point, Mark whispered, "Don't look at them, don't run, just keep walking." I didn't want to keep walking. I wanted to scream. I wanted to bolt, but fear kept my legs moving one slow step at a time. Every second felt stretched thin, like the world was balancing on the edge of something terrible. Then came the moment I can't forget, no matter how hard I try. We reached a portion of the trail where the trees thinned out and the sunlight reached the ground. For a moment, things felt almost normal again. The light made us feel safer, less hunted. But when I looked up, I saw something that froze me in place. A figure was clinging to a tree trunk about 15 feet off the ground. At first glance, it looked human. Pale skin, long limbs, thin torso. But the longer I stared, the more wrong it looked. Its arms were too long, its legs too narrow, its fingers too long, and its face, if you could call it a face, was smooth like clay that had never been sculpted. It tilted its head toward me, not down, not sideways, toward me, like it could feel my eyes on it. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't call for help. The creature, or whatever it was, unfurled itself from the tree with slow, deliberate grace. Its limbs stretched as though they were made of fabric instead of muscle. It didn't drop to the ground. It didn't climb down. It simply slid around the trunk and disappeared behind it with impossible smoothness. I must have made a sound, because my friends grabbed me and pulled me forward. We broke into a run. At that point, none of us cared about staying calm. We sprinted blindly down the trail, branches tearing at our arms, lungs burning, legs shaking. Every few seconds I glanced behind me, half expecting to see those pale figures gliding silently after us. But the forest behind us stayed empty. We didn't stop until we reached the dirt access road near the trailhead. By the time we reached our cars, the forest had returned to normal. Birds chirped, insects buzzed, the air felt lighter. Sound returned. It was as if the woods had simply released us. None of us spoke during the drive home. 2 of my friends never hiked again. 1 moved out of state entirely. Mark refused to talk about it ever again. When people asked how our trip went, we lied, said it was great, said we enjoyed the scenery, said nothing unusual happened. But I haven't set foot in Tuscarora State Forest since that day. Over the years, I've tried to convince myself that we misinterpreted what we saw. That stress, lack of sleep, and fear-twisted shadows into monsters. That the forest played tricks on our senses. That the figures weren't real. That the peeling trees, the silent night, the tapping on my tent, the pale creature climbing the trunk, they were all parts of some elaborate misunderstanding. But the truth never changes. The memory never fades, and I'm not the only one. I've met others. Quiet people, nervous people, people with haunted eyes who've had similar experiences in those woods. They describe thin shapes, pale limbs, smooth faces, silent movement, the sense of being watched from above. Some call them tree people. Others say they're spirits. Some believe there's something ancient, something that's lived in the forest longer than humans. something that doesn't want to be seen, something that punishes those who see it. I don't know what they are. I don't want to know. I only know what I saw, what I felt, and the certainty that whatever lives in those trees is real. Sometimes I dream about it, the pale arm curling around the tree trunk, the smooth head turning toward me, and every time I wake with the same sensation that something is standing in the corner of the room watching me, waiting to see if I remember. I always remember. I wish I didn't. And if you ever find yourself hiking in Tuscarora and the forest suddenly goes quiet and the air grows heavy and you feel eyes watching you from above, don't look up. Don't stop. Don't run. Don't acknowledge the figures between the trees. Because if you see them clearly, they might decide they don't want to let you leave,